This is the Crowdcrux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Briggman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project with your host, Sal Briggman.
Before we get started with this podcast episode, I want to take a second to introduce you to my friends at Fulfillrite. If you need help shipping out your Kickstarter or Indiegogo perks or rewards, Fulfillrite is the absolute best company for you. I've been working with them for a while and I can vouch for their services. They make it dead simple and take all of the headache out of shipping out all of those boxes, all of those orders to your backers and your customers. If you want to check them out, go to fulfillrite.com at FULFILLRITE.com. What up, crowdfunders? Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. You are in the right place if you're interested in learning about how to raise money successfully on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or other crowdfunding websites. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're a creative type, even if you're a nonprofit and you're trying to use crowdfunding to not only raise money, but also gain attention for what you're trying to do online. You're trying to assemble a crowd of people that are raving fans of whatever it is that you're looking to do online. You are in the right place. On today's podcast episode, I brought on a serial successful Kickstarter entrepreneur. So this individual has raised over $700,000 across multiple Kickstarter campaigns, and he is also a super backer, having backed over 250 campaigns on Kickstarter. So we're going to learn from his knowledge and sort of get into what he's learned from doing these various campaigns. He's going to share with you exactly what contributed to their success, how Kickstarter has changed over the years. And if you're going to go into a campaign, you're preparing for one right now, or you're in the middle of a crowdfunding campaign, you're going to learn what you can do to supercharge your campaign, to raise more money, and to really get attention, to stand out from the crowd. So this was a great interview. It's also very cool to hear about the story this entrepreneur went through in order to discover this entirely new career and launch this from something that he was doing completely different from his day job. So it was really cool for that reason also. If you want to get more updates, want an update, a notification every single time I come out with a new podcast episode, and you're listening to this on the podcast app via your iPhone or in any other way, just hit subscribe and you'll get a automatic download and you'll get a notification when I come out with new podcast episodes. So that way you don't have to worry about downloading my new shows. You just hit subscribe and it will automatically fill the queue, so you can listen to these when you're driving, when you're doing laundry, when you're washing dishes, when you're commuting to work, you're on the subway. It's really easy to get the information directly to you and automatically when you hit subscribe. And finally, if you don't know, I also do a blog on crowdfunding called crowdcrux.com. I also have a YouTube channel called Crowdfunding Demystified, where I share educational videos on how to raise money. So I have a lot of different resources out there for you to get up to speed with crowdfunding. But the fastest way, if you really want to get up to speed quickly, you want my best information, also the new articles that I'm putting together for you, the new information and new news announcements, webinars I'm conducting, like all that kind of stuff, you can go to crowdcrux.com/subscribe. That is crowdcrux.com/subscribe. You can get notifications there probably once a week, usually, with my newsletter, where I share some of the new content I have for you, some of the new announcements, some specials that I have going on, all of that kind of stuff you can get at crowdcrux.com/subscribe. Without further ado, let's get into today's podcast episode. Stefan, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited about doing this interview. You've backed a tremendous number of campaigns here, over 250 campaigns. You are a quote-unquote super backer. You've also launched a bunch of different projects on Kickstarter. I'm looking here. Looks like you raised over $700,000 on the platform thus far. You just concluded your most recent campaign. You've had a ton of success, lots of learning, I imagine, and I just honestly would love to pick your brain on this and share with the listeners a little bit about what you've learned and taken away from these different projects. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and welcome.
My pleasure. Thank you, Salvador.
And you're hailing in from Manhattan, you said?
That's right.
Very cool. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and it's been just phenomenal for me over the last few years to see Kickstarter grow into what it's become. Same with Indiegogo and crowdfunding. When actually did you begin launching projects on Kickstarter?
Yeah, it's actually a pleasure to think back that far because I launched my first project in 2012.
Wow.
And at the time, the platform was much smaller. And, it really felt different. It was much more of this like small community, and people were still backing projects because they wanted to help other, people and projects out. And of course you still see that today in Kickstarter, but I do think a lot about someone who would be launching a campaign for the first time today, how much it's changed and how much more competitive it is now. The stakes are high.
How do you think it's different, I would say, with someone who's launching today? What is the major difference? Obviously, a lot more projects. Are there any other differences that sort of come to mind here?
Yeah, I mean, there are probably three things. The first is that people have already been hit up to give to Kickstarter campaigns, right? So in the beginning, if it was this, hey, my brother's launching this thing, can you support me? That kind of luster is gone. That's the first thing. The second, which I think everyone is really familiar with, is that your campaign just has to look top-notch. If your campaign doesn't have a high quality presentation, video, photos, the outline of your page, then you're really at a disadvantage. And the third thing is you now have to bring your own audience. That is the biggest change.
So the bar has just been set a lot higher. You need to come not only with an audience, but also have invested in having a great campaign, having a great video. I think that's going to be, it's kind of difficult to hear because we think of crowdfunding like we're going to Kickstarter to actually get these funds. But it seems like what you're saying is you need to do a lot of work beforehand before you actually get there. You might also have to invest some money going into the project. Is that true?
That's definitely true. I mean, you don't want to sour somebody who's like, I have this amazing idea, I'm going to stick it out there and it's going to fly. At the same time, we want to approach this with candor because 14% of Kickstarter projects don't even receive a single pledge. So that's hard. For us, the budget for a Kickstarter project for us is $40,000. And
wow.
People say you could do it cheaper. Absolutely. If you look at my first project, I shot the video myself. I did it cheaper, right? But now when we're running our business on the outside of Kickstarter, the quality of photography we're using, the quality of video that we're using, all of those things take a lot of time and energy, and they require larger budgets. Now, the good thing is, like on my last project, we did photography for the shirt. We're going to use that photography outside of Kickstarter as well. But if you're not taking good photos and your page doesn't look good, you're going to be at a real disadvantage. So if you can do that stuff yourself or you can find shoestring resources, then that's fantastic. But you still should not underestimate what that budget's going to be. And, maybe for some people, $5,000 is just a tremendous amount of money, right? So you have to, in the early days, when it's your first time on the platform, you have to get creative.
I want to get into some of the more...
If I could just add one thing. The good news is if you have a great product, that's what matters the most. And as long as your video is well done, it's well communicated, it's clear, you shoot it on an iPhone, no problem.
I want to get into some of the tactics and strategies a little bit later, but for now, I'd just love to ask you, can you share with the listeners a little bit about what your company is, Bluffworks, what the campaigns are that you've sort of worked on, just sort of teasing here, just giving us an idea of what you guys make, what you put into the world. Can you share with the listeners a little bit about your story there with the company?
Sure. So my journey started a number of years ago, 10 really, when I outsourced myself to a software development job in Vietnam. And my wife and I didn't have kids at the time. We decided we were going to go for adventure, took a job in Hanoi, writing code for $4 an hour. Okay. And
why? Why would you do that?
The short answer is I love to travel, but my wife told me, she's like, hey, living someplace is not the same as traveling. And I have to tell you that she was right. And it was just a fantastic experience that's hard to duplicate without really being, there or living overseas. It really opens your mind to cultures and different ways of doing things. And it was really life-changing. But while I was there, I wore travel clothes because I rode a motorbike to work and we're traveling a lot, and it just worked. But when I came back to New York, my travel clothes weren't going to work in New York City. And I missed like the durability of them, the fact that they didn't wrinkle, that they're cool and comfortable, and I didn't have to wash them that often. So I finally said, okay, I need to do something about this. I need to take all of the beneficial properties of travel clothes and put them into apparel that can keep up with my everyday life. And I did that. I had a period, a dark period at my software day job in New York where things changed at my company. My company changed hands. I was no longer happy there. And that drove me to finally say, okay, that's it. I'm going to do something about my idea. Mm-hmm. Which I think is interesting because a lot of action comes from pain in people's lives, right? Like, you hate your job or, pain can be a great catalyst for change. So in 2012, it took me a year ahead of that working on finding a fabric, working with mills to really develop this fabric, original pant fabric that had all the fantastic wrinkle-free properties but looked like a wool pant or looked like a normal pant you can wear in the city, not like goofy travel clothes. And that's what we do today. We don't make clothes just for travel. We make clothes for guys' lives that include, work, travel, and play that all blend together. And the guys who wear our stuff are just going nonstop. They want to look good. They need features in their apparel, and they don't want to stop to care for their clothes.
I think you hit on two really important points there. Number one, that usually the major decisions in our life happen when we're under a lot of stress or we're under just this need to make a decision because things aren't going as we want. So we decide to, okay, now we're going to launch this project. We're going to try out this business or do this thing. It's kind of like pushing us a little bit over the edge to where we have to make that decision. And I think the second point is I'm really curious here about you discovering this problem yourself. So I might have heard this wrong, but you traveled, were you making $4 an hour there programming, or did you outsource? I didn't fully get that.
Okay. So in the US, I worked for software consulting companies, and the consulting company I worked for in the US had a Vietnamese connection, right? Where they go into a client and they say, okay, here's a project, we're going to write, develop a new system for you, what have you, and we're going to send some portions of that code offshore because it's more economical. And of course, we've all seen that, in India was the first to do it largely with Y2K, Vietnam and China, they become big markets for coding. So I just approached my company and I said, hey, can I go work for our friends in Vietnam? And they said, sure, we'll pay you local wages.
That's oh my gosh. You got paid $4 an hour for programming work. That's insane. That's like here, you get paid a lot for programming work. That to me just like says something about your mindset. Were you doing this to sort of learn to live like more leanly and really get immersed in the culture? Like, why is it that you accepted that kind of an arrangement?
We did it just for the adventure of travel, and I mean, of which culture and all of those things go with it, right? But it was just like the same reason that we all, I think, love to travel. We just did it at a different level, and we went there sight unseen. We lived in an alley. Like if you do your wingspan, right, you put your hands out to both sides. We lived in an alley that was more narrow than that, where our neighbors in the back of the alley didn't have indoor plumbing. The guy across the street would he kept pigs. He had 3 pigs at the closet side by side and fighting roosters, fighting gamecocks, and rice wine with snakes in it. It's a great time. I mean, look, then we come back to New York and we have a son. I have a son now that it's a different kind of adventure, and he keeps me on my toes, right? But living overseas like that it was a special time. So.
I think that also says something when you're living in that type of environment and you're having to really be scarce a little bit with your resources and make sure that even with your clothing, you don't have as much money to take it to like a washer or dryer and all these different things. You begin to think more deeply about like the basic necessities of life. And it can really tune you into, your apparel, the durability of that, all these different things that I just don't even think about, honestly, on a daily basis. I think you maybe had to start thinking about this a little bit more. And that's really cool to me. It kind of puts you in a different mindset, if you will, where you have to think about these different things.
Yeah, I think it changed my concept of what's possible, because it's very easy to live in some place like the United States, and your impression about what's possible is created by what you're exposed to, right? Your environment around you. And let me give you an example. Like in Vietnam, if you stand on one of those major roads at 4 or 5 in the morning, you will see 16-year-old girls pedaling bicycles, many missing pedals, right? With 100, 150 pounds of vegetables on the back that are going to the market. Now, market happens in the morning, 5, 6 o'clock. So they're 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning when I would ride in a cab to go to the airport, you would see these young women pedaling these bikes in, 50 kilometers from out in the countryside. So you're like, wow, what's possible with a bicycle? And since then, it's put a big impression on my life. I've done some trips where we went to Panama, for example, and bought bikes in a junkyard and just rode them as far as we could down a road that hadn't been written about by the guidebook, because living in Asia had opened my mind to the way other people live. And it changed my idea of what's possible. So there you go.
The problem is when you live in the United States, or really any kind of environment where you have a lot of people around you that have a similar mindset, you begin to forget that all of these different things are possible. To me, to hear about that story, which sounds like a grand adventure, something that I think you want to do when you're young. Obviously, you don't have kids, but it sounds like an amazing adventure. And then to hear that you've launched, multiple successful Kickstarter campaigns, you've raised over $700,000. It just goes to show that it's not about what you have, it's more of what you do with it and the mindset and the resources that you can assemble to make these different things happen. So that's an incredible story, man. That's really cool too. But I want to get into a little bit of, so you had this realization that you want to focus more on apparel. You want to segue from your software job there and sort of get more into creating hard products, things you can ship out to people. When crowdfunding came into the picture, can you walk us through some of the stuff you learned with these initial campaigns and really what you took away?
Specifically initial campaigns, or we just want to talk about best practices for campaigns overall?
I guess what you learned early on, and sort of I want to get into how that changed, and as you've gone through these various projects, what you've learned. Yeah.
Well, I think the first thing that everyone learned on the early days of Kickstarter is to be responsible about your date and the ability to deliver. And we still see that today. We were about 2 months late with delivering our first products, which for 2012 was pretty damn good. And obviously we were able to deliver the products and make our backers happy. So that's one thing. The second is that the campaigns, they're really stressful. And if your campaign's not going well, it's really stressful because obviously you're trying to do everything to pull it out of the dirt. If your campaign is going well, it's similarly stressful because the workload is orders of magnitude larger than you thought it was going to be, right? Now you're like, wait a second, I have 1,000 backers. How do I respond to them? How do I cater to them? They've asked me for photos of X. How do I create these photos during the campaign? Those things take work. And then you're also so excited that you want to pour gas on it. And you just start jumping up and down to put more energy into it. Either way, Kickstarter campaigns are grueling.
So you're feeling this mix of emotions here, oh my gosh, celebration, also at the same time stress and anxiety and fear, all these sort of this mix of emotions. But at the same time, was this sort of the thing that enabled you to break into this category, to change from doing, software work to now running an online store?
Yeah, it really did. I mean, if our first Kickstarter hadn't taken off the way it would, we would have had a much longer uphill battle to build a real company outside of Kickstarter. And it took off because it's interesting. If you look at my first video, as I mentioned, I was developing this one pair of pants to keep up with my life. I never said the words travel in my video. And this is one of the things that's so special about Kickstarter is that I asked a question, and it is a question I recommend for everyone who's launching a campaign, particularly your first campaign. In your survey, you're not supposed to collect too much marketing data. You're not supposed to ask how old are everybody, right? But I asked this one question. I said, why did you back me? And it went really far, above 1,000 responses in terms of some people said you were the most passionate person about wrinkle-free pants. So that tells me, okay, they care about wrinkle-free pants as a product, and they thought that I was the guy, right? So other people said these look good for travel. And we're like, whoa. And travel was one of the most common words we saw in the survey results. So I was not positioning them for travel. I was positioning them for my life that includes travel, but our backers told us that our market actually was travel. And then bloggers picked this up, and they started writing about us from the perspective of travel. and suddenly we have a company that makes travel clothes you can wear back home, kind of not the other way around. So the feedback you get on Kickstarter is one of the most valuable things you can get from the platform. I think the trick now, and not to leap too far ahead into modern tactics, but the feedback, the trick now is how do you get as much of that feedback before you launch your project so you can make your project really good when you pull back the curtain and you do the big reveal when it counts.
I don't even think that's something on the radar for most people, but to see this as sort of like an organic process, that as you're launching, you're getting feedback, even in the fulfillment stages, you're gaining so much information that you can put into future products, that you can put into future things that you're innovating. That's just like a lean startup methodology approach. I know that's kind of getting geeky terms there, but it's really an approach where you're nailing down who is it that you're making products for, and also what is it that they really are seeing that are making them take that action to support your campaign. So I think that's really wise that you asked that, and it seems like that really guided the projects going forward. I had to interrupt this podcast episode because I want to introduce you to my friends at The Gadget Flow. Their product discovery platform reaches 22 million people per month. They've helped more than 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns thus far, and they have a social media following of more than 700,000 followers. If you want to gain access to their marketplace and list your own product, you can go to thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today.
Can I offer an example that really ties to? I agree with what you just said. One of the, during the campaign, we didn't have a black pan. We didn't have a charcoal. Okay? And so our customers told us, "You idiot! You need to add charcoal." So we did it. We added it during the campaign. It became our most popular seller. So obviously, number one, customer feedback was important. But this is also interesting. There's some aspects of data that remain the same forever. And sure enough, charcoal was our most popular color then. It's still our most popular color now.
Really?
If I go back and I look at the color curve of what we sold in that first campaign, it's the same as what we sell today. Okay, we have some different colors that come in and out, but when it's apples to apples, it will remain the same forever. And I've noticed that in data, and it's been a really powerful observation. And the way that we use that is once we get a little bit of data, we don't have to question ourselves, is that going to change next year? Is that going to change the next year after? We can extrapolate out.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm looking here too. So your second campaign, the Ultimate Travel Chino, looks like you're starting to apply some of what you learn, these different things. A lot of people, they might look at Kickstarter and be like, okay, I raised money, I got the initial batch of customers. Why would I return to the platform? Why is it that you decided to not just continue to grow this online store independently? Why did you return to Kickstarter after the first success?
Yeah, I think it's really because of the community. I mean, we connect with new backers there that have such a special relationship with us that every time we go back to the platform, we meet more of those special kind of backer. The second reason is it's kind of like throwing a party. If you launch something on your site and you're like, hey, this is a new release, sometimes when you put it on Kickstarter and it puts that ticking clock, then it adds a little bit of motivation for a customer. And then the third is the nature of the platform is such a good storytelling platform. Like actually, if you look at our website today, I probably still don't tell our story as well as I do in some of our videos, like our blazer video and our recent shirt video. They talk about our products and company, in some ways more powerfully than we do on our own website. So the platform really helps you do that, and the audience is expecting that kind of dialogue. So Kickstarter is really helpful with that.
Your Blazer campaign actually did really well. I mean, over 1,000 backers, over $300,000 raised on this campaign alone. Did you expect that level of success, even though you had two successes previously?
Yeah, that campaign was bet the company for us. So we had a digression in I don't know what it is, 2015. Maybe off 1 year. What is it? 2017 now? Yeah. So in early of 2016, we had a digression where I brought in a little bit of new branding, and we changed kind of the presentation of the company. We took me out of the brand, and we went a little bit more fashion oriented, just based on, from a marketing standpoint. And it was a big mistake. And that really, it hurt our sales. It dropped our conversion rate by half. And you look back and you're like, what an idiot, right? We have this authentic brand where people can like see the founder, and I test everything we put out for more than a year. And, that's the strength of our brand, and our customers connect with that. And, why we even made that misstep. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, I don't know. But that was early in 2016. So when we got to the point of the Blazer, I had been working on the Blazer for 2 years. And in fact, I once got so close that I went around the world to shoot a Blazer video for Kickstarter. And when I came home, the product I was wearing fell apart. So I had a near miss with launching a Kickstarter project with an earlier Blazer fabric that would have just completely gone down in flames. And the way that happened is the materials that I tested for over 6 months in advance of that video worked really well. But when we went to production, the mill could not replicate that level of quality. So when finally, given another year, I get this Blazer fabric that's really, really ready. And we said, okay, this is our dream product, but we're basically bet the company because of the impact of the prior branding on our conversion rate. And that Kickstarter project is when we came back out, we put me back in the brand, and we were really able to speak authentically. And at the time, what we do, and I recommend others do this, is that you build a spreadsheet of comparable products, campaigns on Kickstarter, and you look at how many backers they had, what was their price point, what's the distribution between their 1, 2, 3 unit rewards, and how much money did they raise. And internally, we basically said, look, there's no reason that this project should do any more than $50,000 on a Blazer, because no one had ever done it before. And it did $342, and it saved our company.
And that's off of a $20,000 goal. That is more than 10 times your goal you raised.
Yeah, it was a great success. What we were most proud of is that it was a high ticket item. It was a $250 item, which if you look at Kickstarter data, the most pledges are happening under $100. There's there's a real threshold there. So to be able to generate that trust with the Kickstarter community for somebody to put down $250 in an environment where we know that campaigns, often fail, that was really gratifying.
So for me, the first decision point here, just to even start the company, that's a major decision point. You're taking a ton of risk. You're betting on yourself. You're doing something you haven't really done before. That's a major opportunity and also risk, and that ended up paying off. And then the second decision point, when you sort of lost your way a little bit here, having to decide, okay, we're going to put all our chips on the line. We're going to try and do this right. And we're going to make sure that this is just a killer campaign. And that bet also paid off. I'm just kind of curious here. Were you hearing things, I guess, like those marketing and business people being like, oh yeah, like you need to focus more on your brand and like, take yourself out of the equation. Like, were you hearing that kind of stuff? Or why Absolutely. Is it you decided to take your eye off the ball in that way?
Yeah, that's exactly why we went through the more fashion route. Like the conventional wisdom is that a brand will be more accessible when the face of the brand and the models are people that customers can identify with more easily, and it's not so personal. And we connected with a marketing agency that came with a highly recommended, and I think for some clients they're probably amazing, right? But they weren't as personal and empathetic as our brand and our customers are. They're larger scale. They're more corporate. Wow. And it was the wrong thing for us. So, but I look back on a lot and I figured out there's a reason, an axiom, right? A truth of why entrepreneurs are going to make mistakes. And the reason is in entrepreneurship, nobody gives you a task to do and then you check it off and you're like, okay, I'm done. Like, I'm going to go do something else. The task list is endless. So what you're going to do is you're going to go check off tasks, like check, and start knocking things down until you get to things that are harder and harder and harder. And you're going to push against those things and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to fail because the entrepreneurship is limitless. And, I thought entering into this like, I'm going to do better than average. I had a lot of experience running software projects and I'm not going to make these same kind of mistakes. And it's been quite a wake up for the amount of mistakes that we've made. And the most important thing is that you recover from them and keep going.
But mistakes at the same time are just a great opportunity, because when you learn that something doesn't work, going forward, you now know that lesson and you can then build off of that knowledge, and you can learn from the customer base and like, oh, okay, they like this, they don't like this. So I think it's honestly just, you have to go through that in order to get to the good times and get to the point where you're selling products regularly and people are loving it. It's kind of like a requirement for any entrepreneur out there. I want to, at the end of this interview, sort of round off with the final campaign that you conducted. But before we get into that, I'd love it if you could just share with the listeners some of the tips or some of the techniques, the things that you can share with them in terms of, if they want to have a success like yours, they want to raise money on Kickstarter, how can they do that? How can they do that more effectively? Could you share with them just a few tips for having a successful campaign?
Yeah, I think absolutely the most important thing on Kickstarter is the hook. And the hook has to be, what are you selling? Why is it exciting and different? And why is it worth somebody buying it on Kickstarter? And it's interesting, if you look at, let's say, other pieces of apparel, even compared to our blazer or anything else that we make, there are hoodies on Kickstarter that have raised millions of dollars, and they've done it, in a lot of cases, they're just due to pockets or functionality, right? So you're like, okay, what is the hook there? The hook there is that people, first of all, they like hoodies, but they really, really want a hoodie with 1 million pockets. And that's the hook. And you really need to understand what is going to make people jump over that fence to back you on Kickstarter.
Is that something you learned from backing many campaigns yourself or studying them? How did you discover that sort of a lesson there?
Yeah, I'd have observed that by watching multiple comparable campaigns, both of which are sometimes like done, presented really well, and be like, wow, why is this one moving and that one isn't? It's still a subtle thing. It doesn't mean you can put 3 campaigns in front of me and I can tell you which one's gonna move, right? I mean, if it did, I'd be a millionaire, right? Like, if anybody could do that. But that's what I observed, and I've observed that that's more important. I mean, the next thing we're talking about is like, or we already talked about it, your campaign has to look fantastic. But you can find campaigns that don't look as fantastic that have done very well. And unless a lot of times you're selling something that's available in the marketplace, right? I mean, if you're going to do like denim, salvage denim, if it does, like, that stuff exists in the world. So you really have to communicate why your product is different and why it's worth it for someone to buy it right now.
And in terms of actually getting someone to make that decision, something we haven't really talked about very much is the story behind that product. Why have you found that the storytelling is fundamental to the selling or to the getting the people to even notice what you're doing with Kickstarter? I'm speaking to the crowdfunders in the audience who have already launched a Kickstarter campaign, or have actually even successfully run a campaign. And the reason is, I think you will understand this pain point most. And that is, when you finally do raise money on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, the hardest part is not collecting the cash. The hardest part is shipping out all of those perks and rewards to your backers. It is a nightmare, my friends. It's a lot of spreadsheets, it's a lot of headache, and it's a lot of stress. That's why I recommend BackerKit. If you have not heard of BackerKit, they help you collect surveys, they help you collect data, and the entire fulfillment process is just so much easier and so many less spreadsheets when you use their software. You can check them out at backerkit.com and use CrowdCrux for a special discount.
In the beginning, it was about the person that, people backed projects on Kickstarter because they believed in the person. So in the earlier days of the platform, it was very important to understand that person's story, engage their level of confidence. I think that has shifted. I've seen a lot of very successful projects where even the founders are a little bit opaque. Kickstarter is open to other countries, and they can be a founder that's overseas. And I will rarely back something where I can't really see who they are, or I don't understand why they're passionate and interested about this thing. That usually happens in technology, right? You have an offshore technology company that's good at something, and they say, you know what, we're going to make a cool product and we're going to put it on Kickstarter, but they don't feel like the founders are like Kickstarter community ready. So they kind of obfuscate like who they are. And that makes me uncomfortable. So I think that's why the story's been important. But product is winning the day now. product is more important than story on Kickstarter right now, I think.
The other thing you've seen is yourself, when you remove yourself from the equation and your own, I guess, the elements of your character and your story in the product, it had a dip in sales. So I can definitely see that it does play a relationship building tool, but at the end of the day, the product is king. You have to be making something that people want. Now, in terms of actually getting people's awareness and driving traffic to the project, we've seen sort of an evolution in the techniques you can use to do that. So what have you been using to get people interested in the project, to drive traffic, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so there's really three things. There's PR, social, and ads, right? So PR in the beginning, when Kickstarter was younger, it was easier to get PR when the products were more notable. If you have a super, super notable product today, if you have a fidget cube, right, then you're going to get PR. But PR has become harder to come by for Kickstarter projects. That's number one. The second is social. It's a best practice to build a social following in advance of launching your Kickstarter project. And people are often like, how do I do that? How do I talk about a product before I have it? And really the answer is to be passionate in your space, whatever that is. So if you were going to launch a foam roller, let's say you got a new foam roller that's going to help break up scar tissue for athletes, then you need to have a significant following on social platforms for talking about athletic training. And if you build up that credibility and even ask people what they think about products and get into that discussion, then you can build a following by the time you're ready to release your product. And then the third thing is advertising. And I think one of the biggest questions that I get from other people running campaigns is, should I work with a firm? And firms will help you with your Kickstarter advertising. The cost of customer acquisition can be expensive. So I'll pause there for a second. I figure you want to take us through advertising a little bit more at some point. But those are the three ways to bring audience.
Okay. I do think advertising is something that's on many people's minds because, if you have a lot of time, you can build up a social media following. If you have time, you're willing to work, you can reach out to influencers, you can create a media list, you can really get going with the PR and going after even smaller or medium-sized bloggers, rolling that into larger media hits. In terms of advertising, though, I think it's just still a question mark for many people. So for you, of your advertising, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's these different agencies, have you seen success with that? And is that something you're doing with your new launches?
Yeah. So advertising will definitely be a component of our new launches going forward. It was not a major component of the Blazer campaign, and it was a modest part of our recent Meridian dress shirt campaign. And the key to advertising, there's two things. One is testing. And people anybody who's in digital advertising knows this, right? You have to put out a dozen photos and run them all and see which one is converting, and then you pile on that one. Photos, message. You just vary everything. You A/B test everything. The second thing is the audience. And what the advertising companies bring for you is they bring for you audiences on Facebook and in some cases email that they can target. And the reason that's so relevant is because these are people that are comfortable backing on Kickstarter. The way that they get them is every client who signs up with those agencies has to share their list of backers at the end of campaign. So there are agencies that have done like Peak Design, for example, right? Everybody's familiar with Peak Design, raising tremendous amounts of money on Kickstarter. So you can connect with an agency that's going to be able to target on Facebook Peak Design's followers. And that's really important because there are people who like to buy backpacks and there are people who like to buy backpacks on Kickstarter, and you don't have the same conversion rate for both audiences.
So if you're not willing to invest in one of these agencies, basically you then need to spend more time doing things like building your email list, your social following, the organic sort of PR outreach there. It seems to me. Otherwise, if you're short on time or you have the budget, going with one of these agencies or even just testing with Facebook ads. I mean, you can do it really cheaply nowadays, even like $5 a day, and just kind of see what kind of data you're getting there. I think it pays to do that early on, just because then you're working with more data going forward.
It's true. And I think if you do work with an agency, you have to be very careful about the cost. They get extremely expensive. And the only number you care about is the cost of customer acquisition, right? So if you're running a business, there's basically three things. There's the overhead, like how much are you paying yourself and rent and all that kind of stuff, which a lot of cases people aren't going to have for a Kickstarter project. There's the cost of goods sold, which is like, let's say overhead 0, right? So let's say cost of goods sold is $50. And if you had, like a 66% margin, you'd be selling it for $150 in the real world. But you're going to discount it down to like $98 on Kickstarter, right? So you're not even selling it for $150. Now you're selling it $98. Now your margin's only 50%, $50 for cost of goods, 98 for the total. Now you're going to put cost of customer acquisition on there. It's pretty easy to have a cost of customer acquisition of $45. Very easy. I mean, it's different by different industries, but I think a lot of people go in with the firms and of course they're telling you great stories, and you can actually see what they've done to other projects, and they may have done it at a cost of customer acquisition at $60. Now you're actually losing money on your Kickstarter campaign. It is not uncommon.
So the most important thing is to nail down that cost of customer acquisition, and also to get a finger on your audience and why it is they're going to buy your product, what they like about your product. It seems to me that's the smartest thing before going into advertising. I have one or two more questions here but before we get into that, I just want to ask you really quickly, where can people go to check out your work, the campaigns you've launched, and sort of the stuff that you're offering here with your apparel brand, Bluffworks?
Yeah, so I mean, all of our stuff is on bluffworks.com. And then if you want to learn about me, I wrote a pretty honest LinkedIn profile. That's the pleasure of not having a day job. You can say, what the hell, and just tell like it is. And so I'm pretty proud of that profile. That was really fun to write. And in it, I talked about, places I did well and places where I really screwed things up, which we all do. So that was fun. And then, of course, on Kickstarter, if you look at my backer profile, you can see the project I've backed, and you can see the projects that I've launched.
Okay, so that's bluffworks.com.
That's right.
And also link up your LinkedIn in the show notes so people can easily check that out. So you've written some posts here on LinkedIn that they can look into.
That too.
Okay, awesome. Well, the last question I have for you here is, so with your most recent project, the Ultimate Travel Shirt, you now have a wealth of experience. You've gone through the ups and downs with the entrepreneurial journey. You've seen what it's like to launch a project and get access to thousands of backers and funding and all this kind of stuff. So you just geared up for this last project. What was that project like? What did you learn from this one? And sort of, could you share with the audience, I guess, your experience with this one being such a seasoned campaigner at this point?
Yeah. I think maybe one of the things to share that's really gratifying, to share with a community like yours is that it was not as easy as we thought it would be. And, it's our fourth project, so we took some lessons from it. And I think what the biggest lesson I took away from it is testing. And when I say it wasn't easy, in terms of like conversion rate and sales and cost of acquisition with advertising, I don't think the campaign got, it didn't pass the Blazer. Let's put it that way, right? The Blazer had a higher dollar value, but we also thought that we would be able to equal the Blazer in terms of the number of backers, and we get higher number of backers even though the price point is lower, right? So the reason this is so interesting is that the lesson that you take away is testing. And my advice would be to try, if there was a platform before Kickstarter that we could all release on, that would be amazing, because you would get all this customer feedback and you would learn what worked and what didn't work. And then your actual Kickstarter reveal would be very powerful. So I think a good lesson for people is to try to find ways that you can test your campaign before it's on Kickstarter. And one way, for example, is that there are people who have put ads on Facebook. Like, let's say I'm going to make a pen, right? I'm going to make world's greatest pen, whatever it does. I could put an ad on Facebook for this pen that goes to a landing page that talks about the pen and says, enter your email coming soon.
Yes. We need to talk about that more. Geez. I totally advocate that. And that's a really great technique as well, just to gauge demand for the product, I think.
Yep. And you can find out what should you call the pen? What's your photo? Should have a picture with like the pen in your hand. Should have a picture of the pen in a white background. You get the idea. So That's my big takeaway. I think people should try to test it as much as you can before you launch it so you can be as prepared as possible. And then when you're live, you should not be afraid to shift it up. I mean, we changed our project name 3 times and we did 2 different videos. And most of the time when I talk to people, like, the campaign's not going well, and I'm like, you need to change your video. And they're like, do it or not, right?
Yeah.
You have to do it. So
yeah. That's very well said. Well, this has been just a wealth of information, so many great tips. Your story is really interesting to me, man. And I just wanted to round it off with this quote that you sent me. And this is something that you said, I believe. It says, "Bluffworks products are personal to me. They start with a fight because in the beginning, I'm mad. Something I wear is driving me crazy and it has to change." I love that the entire company sort of started with that, and the entire journey you went through, always sort of pushing and really discovering your potential as you go, because that's not really set when it comes to entrepreneurship. So thank you for sharing all of that. I love it if you could just leave the last word here. And for someone out there who is right now in the trenches, they're thinking of launching one of these campaigns, they're thinking of using crowdfunding, whether it's Kickstarter or Indiegogo, could you give them a word of encouragement or a final tip or something that sort of you yourself wish you knew going into your first campaign?
Yeah, build a team. There's no way you're good at all of the things that your company needs to be good at. To be a real company, or even to make this campaign go. Build a team, you'll be far less lonely, and you'll do a hell of a lot better.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been great to have you back with some of your new launches, and I look forward to your next campaign.
That sounds great. Thanks very much, Salvador.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified Podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman. Thank you for tuning in to today's podcast episode. I hope you go and check out some of the other episodes in the archives of this show. And if you want new episodes, of course, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button and it will be automatically downloaded onto your iPhone or wherever else you are subscribed to this show. Finally, the last thing I want to leave you with here is that Kickstarter is about way more than just raising money. It's about the beginning of an entirely new journey. It's about transitioning from one career to the other. It's about starting that online business that can go on to generate 6 or even 7 figures in sales per year. It's really the beginning. Kickstarter is very appropriately named. Indiegogo is also another great marketplace, another great crowdfunding platform that can instantly change the trajectory of your career and of your life. It can connect you with this group of early adopter customers. So it's just incredibly powerful. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about crowdfunding is I want to deliver the best strategies, the best tips, the best techniques that you can use to improve the quality of your crowdfunding campaign. Not only to help you raise more money, but also to have better marketing overall, to reach more people, to impact more individuals and more backers. That is my goal with this show. And with all the other educational resources that I put out there, the videos, the blog posts, the books I've written, like the Kickstarter launch formula, etc., that is my overarching goal. If you want to gain access to the new articles, the new content, the new videos that I'm creating, if you also want access to some of the specials that I have going on, also the webinars, the web classes that I conduct, and really just be notified and in the loop with everything that I'm doing to bring new education to you, you can go to crowdcrux.com/subscribe and enter your email address to join my newsletter, which I usually send out every single week on a Thursday or a Friday. That's crowdcrux.com/subscribe. That is crowdcrux.com/subscribe. Not only do you gain access to free information, free education, but you're also there to see and surround yourself with other success stories. I'll share with you other people that are just like you that are raising money successfully every single week, every single day on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and other crowdfunding websites. So this isn't only about getting you the right education, getting you the right strategies, but it's also about setting you up right in terms of your mindset. So that way, when you go into your campaign, you feel way more confident. You feel way more assured knowing that other people just like you are raising money this way, and that it's something that if you actually devote more time to, if you actually make it a priority and even create a budget for your launch, it's going to be well worth it. So that is crowdcrux.com/subscribe. Thanks so much for tuning into today's podcast episode, and I will see you next time.